Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Children's ONS meeting on 11th of December 2025. I'm Councillor Johnson, and I believe it's now 7 p.m, and I'd like to start the meeting. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded for publication on the Council's website. And you'll be pleased to know there are no planned fire alarms this evening. In case of an emergency, please evacuate the building using the nearest available exit and congregate at the assembly point outside the college. Apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Abbas, who's being substituted by Councillor Rigby. Apologies for Councillor Green, who's being substituted by Councillor Lydiard. And apologies from Councillor Fletcher. Are there any other apologies? No other apologies? Okay. So we'll now go on to the minutes. As you know, I wasn't on the committee on the 18th of September, so I do move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of September are approved as a correct record, but are there any comments on the accuracy?
Not from me. Approved for me.
Okay. Okay, the minutes are approved then. Are there any declarations of interest? Yes, Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Chair. Just like to declare that I work at Treetops Learning Community and that my son works at Woodside Academy and my husband is, Councillor John Kent, is a governor at Woodside Academy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I know who your husband is. Okay. Move to item 4, which is under the heading of unplanned scrutiny items and members' rights of reference. I would like to briefly raise the recent Mossbourne Federation review, which was conducted in Hackney, and the subsequent media attention from this week. Following on from that report's publication, the Council has made a statement and will endeavour to work hard with that trust as part of the review's recommendations and concerns. Thurrock's priority always remains the well-being and achievement of our children, and I'm suggesting that a formal update on this matter be brought back to this committee in February 2026. Is that everyone happy with that? Not before time, agreed, it's done. I would like to also add in there that the committee members might want to think on this, that I think it's the 29th of January, we have a meeting with Jonathan Duff from the Regional Schools Office, Director's Office. If you've got any questions that you particularly want to ask him, please email them through to Claire and we'll get them through. But I do suggest that the Mossbourne situation is something we can bring up with him. Is that okay with you, Gary?
My last 12 emails.
There you are. You got that chance on the 29th of Jan. Move on to item 5 then. Families First Partnership Report. I believe, Janet, you're going to present this report. And can I say, Janet, when you're finished with this, you are more than welcome to leave, as I know you've got a long journey.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to summarise some of the information in the report rather than kind of read it out. I'm hoping that people have had an opportunity to read it. So the Family First Partnership Programme is the government's plan to transform the children's social care systems. So focusing on early intervention, multi-agency collaboration and a family-centred support through reforms to family help, multi-agency child protection and family group decision making. Guidance has been provided in terms of what we should be doing, what each local authority should be doing as part of the reforms. And the aim is to help safeguard, is for partners to work closely together to implement the reforms to family help and multi-agency child protection and the decision making. There's clear emphasis on collaboration, local co-design, and the inclusion of children, young people and families in the shaping of services. It's not statutory guidance as yet, but complements existing frameworks like Working Together and National Framework. The ultimate goal is to improve outcomes for children and families and reduce the number of children entering care, and that every child should be able to grow up safely with the right support in their home. The guide identifies some key areas of focus, with a vision shifting from a focus on crisis intervention and managing at the time a problem arises, to early intervention, ensuring families receive timely integration and a relationship-focused support. The aim is to prevent families having to tell their stories again and again and again, and it emphasises a seamless system combining targeted early help and child in need alongside child protection services. So there are 4 pillars. So there's family help. So it's a whole family approach led by family help lead practitioners who should coordinate, support and maintain consistent relationships with the families. One of the things that children and parents sometimes will say they find really difficult is trying to rebuild relationships. So in the current system, in most local authorities, cases come in, they go through assessment, then they might go to child in need, child protection team, then they might go to children looked after. So this is to prevent each time a young person transitions to a different part of the service, them having to have a different social worker or a different practitioner. There's multi-agency child protection teams, that's expert-led teams with dedicated social workers, police officers, health practitioners, and other relevant professionals to address child protection concerns and significant harm. Family group decision-making, so a voluntary process to empower families to create family-led plans for child safety and well-being, but also to support them in making those plans, so trying to think creatively about how we support children to stay at home where it's safe to do so. The key principles and system enablers are alignment with children's social care, national framework and working together, improved information sharing and data integration across agencies supported by the Children's Wellbeing and School Bills, strengthened multi-agency safeguarding arrangements with education and childcare settings playing a central role, and promotion of evidence-based interventions to improve outcomes for children and families. Each local authority has received grant funding to enable them to embed and to plan for these things. And funding has been confirmed. We've got funding in 25-26, and funding has been confirmed for the next 2 years after that, but it's not been determined what that funding will be. So in terms of timeline and expectations for implementation and the reforms, so this year, from April 2025 to the end of March 2026, local authorities are using that period of time to begin transformation activity. So that's planning what that will look like, engaging partners, engaging children and young people, the communities, but also kind of really thinking carefully about what we do. What we don't want to do is upend a system that we know works really well. It's really clear that there's flexibility in terms of what's expected of us. There's no rigid one-size-fits-all model. There are regular meetings with the DFE to talk about our progress, and we have to submit a delivery plan. We've been really clear with the DFE. We know we deliver outstanding services for our children, and our ambition for Thurrock children is to continue to deliver those outstanding services and positive outcomes, and this aligns well with the expectations. We want to build on stronger early help and child protection services. We want to obviously create a more integrated, responsive system that supports families from early intervention through to child protection. We want to strengthen our multi-agency partnership to anticipate and respond to emerging needs. And we want to look at expanding and using our family hubs and making services more flexible and community-based. We're looking at doing this through reshaping how our services are delivered and ensuring that social work practice remains at the highest possible standard, and to ensure the best outcomes for children and their families. So that's a summary of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Any members got any questions or comments? Councillor Anderson, then Councillor Kent, and then Councillor Raper. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for introducing the report. So is the expectation that this Family First programme will be staffed with new people? Is the expectation that people are going to be employed to deliver these services? or are we going to bolt on to existing people like social workers, educators, etc.?
So the expectation is that we deliver things slightly differently. So we will be using the social workers that we've got currently in the system. But part of this is about saying, in order to deliver some of this, we don't always need qualified social workers. That sometimes there are people who are qualified, so somebody who's got an extra expertise in substance misuse or emotional well-being. So it's trying to kind of think about, what do parents need, what do children need, and can we deliver things different? Some of this is also in response to a shortage in social workers and thinking about, well, can we be creative? Is a social worker always the best person to do that, and can other people do that? So some of what we're doing is looking at our structures. We're having those conversations about what that should look like. But it's about having lead practitioners, somebody who stays the course all the way along for the child. So it's not about adding more social workers. It's more about looking at what we've got and realigning it so that we can kind of integrate our early help with child in need, so that you don't have all these transition points for families.
And are we confident that in undertaking that realignment, as you put it, that we have the resource to do that? Because this is more stuff, as it were, to do. And you did mention that although it's not an exclusively social care worker-led program, there is involvement from social workers. So is there a capacity in the system to provide this service?
So we think there is a capacity within the system to provide a service, and there is grant funding that goes alongside it to help us to develop that. Also, if we're successful in this, and I think the aim is that where possible, children stay at home. So we kind of keep them at the early intervention stage. So it's prevention rather than waiting for something to happen and then trying to kind of manage it. So it should, if it's effective, reduce some of the costs. So it should mean more children at home. It should mean eventually a reduction of children who are on a plan, children who are looked after. And it's about so with family decision making, for example, it is about helping families to find their own solutions. So using their own network, supported by us, to think about how they can keep their children within the family network. So is everybody within their network being part of that conversation? So rather than it escalating to the point where children need to come into our care, hopefully we'll be able to support families to come to solutions themselves, which should hopefully reduce costs.
I certainly agree that the best place for children is at home. So glad to hear you say that. One last quick question that I had was there's a little line here, 6.1 under consultation, that says consultation with staff, residents and young people has commenced and their views considered. That the way that's worded suggests that they've been considered and the consultation has completed and we've looked at it. So I just wanted to it might be a semantics thing, but I just wanted to check that, and if we have, what were the views?
So we are in the process of consultation. So we're having conversations with staff because it impacts on their work. We're having conversations with young people. We've got a conference arranged in February where we will be inviting partners, community groups, young people, parents, to have those conversations. We're also developed some questionnaires, QR codes. So all of those things will be taken into consideration. We're constantly consulting our young people about the services that they receive. And so some of those things, some of those conversations, some of that feedback is what we'll be using to think about how we deliver the service. So, for example, young people saying, I have too many social workers, is something that we will be thinking about to make sure that actually we try and reduce the numbers of changes. We can't kind of eradicate social workers moving on or there being changes, but we're trying to think, how can we, when we talk, for example, when children are missing from placement or from home, we do return home interviews. That sort of informs how children are feeling. Sometimes it's about children wanting to be at home, maybe wanting to be within their family network. And so we'll be using all of that feedback to think about how we can do things differently and how we can help children to feel, and families, to feel like they are the architects of their own plans, and to empower them, really, so that they can feel like they're part of a solution rather than being done to, that we will do with.
I think Councillor Kent was next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. First, there's three things that sort of wanted to mention. First of all, the first thing was about the have we got the capacity within the system with what else is going on, including potentially local government reorganisation. And on the financial side of it, looking at there's I think it's 1.1 million that's been a ring-fence grant. Are you confident that we've actually that money is okay and we can deliver on that money, please?
Okay, so in terms of the money, obviously we're kind of making sure that we're planning really well around what we're going to spend it on. And in this year, it is about transformation. So some of that is about training and development. It's about thinking about the partner agencies. Within that ring-fence grant, there is money to kind of support the partners, and sort of just thinking about what we need within the system. We think we've got enough in terms of course, more's always better, but we think we've got enough to deliver what we need to deliver. And the grant will make some of that possible. You know, trying to do it without the grant would be really difficult. What we want to do is to be able to recruit people who are alternatively qualified, and some of those people will already be within the system. But we also want to be able to be looking at outcomes and making sure that whatever we're doing is having an effective outcome for children and young people. We want to make sure staff are trained, and the development is there so that they can do trauma-informed practice. We're looking at systemic training. We're looking at partnership training as well. So we're having all of those conversations to make sure and planning how we're going to spend that money. We think we can do that within the budget that we've got. And we obviously, like all, I mean, later on there's a conversation about the savings that we'll be making. And we're hoping that with the transformation, we'll also be able to deliver children's part of the savings that we've identified. In terms of local government reorganisation, we're having conversations across the sets, so across Southend, Essex and Thurrock, and having those conversations about with the police, because obviously Essex Police delivers right across the Greater Essex footprint. We're also having those conversations with health as well, to think about our current systems, how we're delivering now, how we might deliver in the future. Are there things that we can be doing together? Can we pull some resources, for example, so that we can have somebody from health that can maybe coordinate some of the stuff across the Greater Essex footprint? So we're really trying to think about, we need to deliver now, and we need to make sure that this is Thurrock at the moment, and we need to deliver for Thurrock children, but we also need to think about what those implications might be for the future. And we're having those conversations, and that's kind of being kept live.
Sorry, Chair, just one more, and it's probably more for yourself. Is on page 18, 6.2, it mentions about regular updates to the children's ONS. I just wondered if we considered how regular those updates would be.
So that's for discussion, really. I mean, there's a governance, there is governance arrangements, and so currently there's a governance board. It also goes to our local Safeguarding Children's Partnership, but it's important that obviously Overview and Scrutiny have that overview as well, and they're able to kind of challenge, offer ideas, think about what they would like. I mean, yeah. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, I put it down as something that I think we need to think about, but it's, yeah, I just thought that'd be something for discussion.
Councillor Raper?
Thank you. Thank you for the report. Just, I may perhaps just not being understanding what you've written here, but on page 18, 5.1, alternative options considered, I couldn't work out what the options were. Can you perhaps just expand a bit? Thank you.
I suppose what I was trying to say is if we don't implement this, this is kind of something that's required nationally. All local authorities have to start working in this way. So the Wellbeing Bill is really clear that there's an expectation that we're all using a family-first approach, that there's an expectation that we move to family help and that we integrate our child in need with our early help offer, that we have multi-agency child protection teams. We're subject to Ofsted, we're subject to scrutiny from the DfE. If we don't do this, then we will be failing in our duties. So there is no alternative, really.
That's what I was going to say. So
Sorry.
no, that's fine. That
long
was
way
what I
round.
read it as, but then I thought I might be missing something. So thank you for that.
Councillor Byrne?
Yes. You mentioned delivering quite a few times on that. We have to be well, we have to deliver. It's the end user, it's the parents and the children, isn't it? So how do you monitor and judge if we are delivering what we say in these meetings? Is there like KPIs or how do we know? I mean, you said deliver, but and that comes out of this meeting. How do you check and come back to us and say, yes, we are delivering?
So in children's social care, we have regular performance meetings, we have regular data, we have a dashboard where all of our data is currently held, and we review those every 4 weeks. Also, I think on the work programme, there's a performance report that's supposed to come here. In terms of having to feed back to the DfE, we have to do regular data feedback. So at the moment, they're trying to work out what people can do. So what's the art of the possible in terms of what we currently record. And there is work ongoing at the moment to look at the kind of the system providers, the two main ones being Liquid Logic and Mosaic. It's Mosaic, isn't it? And to see what can be pulled down from those systems. So they're asking us questions at the moment. So for example, how many family network meetings we have, how many children on a plan, how many children on child in need, how many children at early help, how many have stepped down into early help and how many have stepped up. Those sorts of things will help us to be able to measure the outcome of what we're doing and feedback. So if children are saying, actually I feel listened to, I feel safe, I'm able to stay with my family. If parents are able to say, actually I felt like I was really supported, even if it doesn't work for them, you know, because sometimes, you know, inevitably there will be times when children can't stay at home and they can't stay within the network. So it isn't just about numbers, it's also about outcomes for children. You know, are they achieving at school? Are they feeling safe? Are they within their families? Are we reducing the numbers of children being looked after? So those are the things that will help us to measure how successful we are.
I believe Councillor Rigby was next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Janet, for your report. Councillor Byrne covered a bit of what I was going to ask, but going back to sort of measuring the outcomes, do you have a sort of anticipated time frame from when the preventative actions will, you know, bear fruit with the cost savings? And because a lot of it, as you mentioned, there is quite qualitative, as in how people are feeling rather than actual hard data, that's going to be quite hard as well to feed back into reports as to how, you know, how it's working as well. So.
I mean, some of it, this isn't something that we'll see immediate impact on. There's some things that we can say, okay, if we're looking at alternatively qualified staff, if we're thinking about roles, there'll be some things that we can say, yes, we will make savings on that in the next 6 months or in the next year. There are some things, but so for example, if we were reducing our numbers of children looked after, we should start to hopefully see that in our placement budget eventually, but it's not going to happen overnight. And I think the DfE are really clear in their conversations with us, is we're saying we're taking this into a slow pace. We think we've got really good services. We know we're going to be going through LGR, and we want to make sure that we really think about it carefully and we don't end up with families, with destabilising the workforce and destabilising children and families. It's not something we're going to be able to measure immediately and say, there you are, that's the saving, we've made it. It really will be about, if numbers of children in need come down, numbers of children on a child protection come down, we have more at the early help stage. You know, we know that, you know, if you invest in early help and you help children to stay at home within their families, that is going to cost less than a child that ends up in a placement. So we should start to see that, but I can't say it will happen next week, next month, no.
Thank you.
Councillor Leakey.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your report, Janet. I'm looking at the transformation. It's like what I can see is we are already practicing this structure in social work, you know, and I'm wondering what kind of structure do we have in Thurrock? Like the structure from the referral up to child in need and child protection, because it's already in place. So what kind of structure do we have in Thurrock that actually captures the transformation?
So currently we have the MASH, where things come in through the front door, the referrals. We have our child and family assessment teams, where the assessments are done, and it's, you know, it might be that they're able to kind of provide interventions. That means that, you know, the case can either step down to early help, universal services, or, you know, that if there's further work needed, it then might move over to what we call our family support teams. Depending on the long-term plan, it may end up in our children looked after service. The aim of this reform is to say, do we need all those services? It's not that we don't need social workers, it's not that we don't need to work with families, but can we work with them differently? So our first thought should be about early intervention. We have really good early intervention services. We've got really, you know, we were one of the local authorities that piloted the family hubs, and that's been really successful. That's working really well. Our teams work really closely together. We try and make sure that when things come through the front door, that we look at threshold. Can this stay in early help? Does it have to come up into children's social care? What we're hoping this will do, and we hope to start piloting it early in the new year, what we're hoping this will do is mean that families feel like they're kind of, it's one system. So they're not sort of, so for example, if they're in early help at the moment, they might think, right, I've told this social worker how I'm feeling, and they've supported me and helped me, and then something changes and it moves up into the statutory social care bit of the service. Then they, even though the file is there, you still have to build a rapport and you have to build a relationship, so they feel like they have to tell the story again. And at each point of a transition, they have to tell that story again. And so it's about kind of having a smoother service. It's about the experience of children, the experience of parents. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure if it does, or if I've kind of gone off on a tangent.
Dr. Adenike?
I was wondering, you mentioned that you will probably have in-house staff that are already trained to take up some of the transformational roles. Wouldn't this mean they will be drawn away from their primary responsibilities, and that might create another risk? And how will you mitigate against that happening?
So the plan is to make sure we don't take away from, you know,
Existing roles?
the roles that are kind of currently there. So we currently have, you know, social workers allocated to children and families. So what the funding allows us to do is to think about how we transform from one bit of the service into the next. So there may be some points where we have to kind of think of backfilling using the grant that's available to us. But by having people who are already in the system able to do the work. So for example, if we've got somebody in the system who's got an expertise in substance misuse, they would become the key worker. It's not that we would take them off to do something else and then there's a gap. The idea being that the right person at the right time is the person that works with the family.
All right, thank you.
Any more questions or comments? Okay, I do have a couple. Go back to, I think it was Councillor Kent who brought up about the bringing this back to the overview and scrutiny. I mean, we don't have that many meetings, so would it be possible to, you know, if something's, a briefing note in between, email to the members of this committee, just, you know, if something's come up that you think we should know, rather than waiting until the next committee.
Yeah, that'd be absolutely fine.
And one other thing that really concerned, not really concerned, but it said the bill is currently passing through Parliament. Has it been passed yet? And do we know how long it's going to be? Because I hate to think we're going through all this for nothing.
I mean, it hasn't gone through as yet, but I think it's really clear. You know, the government seem really clear. Funding's already been agreed. They're saying it's going to be agreed for the next 3 years. It's just a matter of time, but the guidance is there, the expectation is there, all local authorities are moving towards it. So, yeah.
Thanks, Janet. So it is our money. we can keep it. Sorry, go on, Shella.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's still in the actual bill itself is still in the House of Lords. It's not it started in the House of Commons, it's gone to the House of Lords, it has to come back to the House of Commons and then get royal assent. I think the expectation is it will get royal assent sometime in sort of April time. But as Janet says, we've had DFE guidance about Families First Pathfinder, and that's usually under Section 7, which is if you don't do it and something occurs, then you have to explain why you've not followed guidance. So although it's not in legislation yet, and there may be a few tweaks in the legislation, and without getting overly nerdy and technical about it, there'll be a few things in there that might be a little bit different, but it's not going to change the vision or the overall plan of how they want social care to operate going forward.
Thanks, Sheila. I'm sure there will be some tweaks. But I mean, a couple of things that really jump out to me on this is information sharing and multi-agencies. I mean, it's imperative. That's the only way this is going to work. But we do have an outstanding. We are outstanding. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. But I welcome the report. I think it's well written. It's easy to understand, and quite a few questions from committee members today. If there's nothing else, then we'll go to the recommendations. That we consider this report and provide feedback, including with regard to any areas of transformation and its alignment with national expectations and local priorities. Well, I think we've done that. Do you agree? Agreed? Thank you very much. Janet, you have a drive now. Please go. See you. That brings us to item 6, Children Looked After and Care Leavers Sufficiency Strategy, from pages 37 excuse me, to 42. Can I ask Elsie McQueen and James Purdy to present this report, please?
Good evening. Good evening, Chair and councillors. I'm going to introduce this report. So in terms of the sufficiency strategy, I just want to make really clear that our ambition is that we ultimately provide for every child and young person, regardless of their background or disability, that cannot be looked after at home, suitable child-centered options for their care, support, and also support their sense of belonging. We want every looked after child to have the right home, in the right place, with the right carers, and at the right time, preferably local to their school, friendships, family, and community. Sufficiency is really about how we integrate that aspiration into the resources that we can access for our children and young people when they're at their most vulnerable and in need of support from the local authority. So how we're going to do this, we are going to increase the number of in-house foster carers through recruitment and retention. And we know we are doing this against a backdrop of a real challenging area around foster carer recruitment. We know we've got an aging population of foster carers, so our real challenge is how we maintain momentum, visibility, and make sure our community within Thurrock understand the need for us to look after our children locally. We'll also be, as part of this work and sufficiency maintenance, exploring the extended family network. So this fits quite nicely to what Janet was talking about in terms of the Family First Partnership Program. The idea is, before we consider children coming into mainstream fostering arrangement or residential or alternative care arrangements, that we've explored all the options within the family and friendship network. That's a good way to actually support children, maintain their identity, maintain their friendships, and maintain their sense of being valued and sense of belonging. We'll also be, as part of this, looking at enhancing our supported accommodation options. This is for older young people who might come into care at 16, 17, without the level of need that might require extensive support, for example, from a residential setting. So within our supported accommodation provisions, what we are trying to do is explore different options that can support different range of needs and abilities, and also support the skills for independent living, employment, education, and training. Because if we don't support that, then we are leaving this cohort of young people really vulnerable as they transition into adulthood. We are also, as we do this, making sure we respond to the voice and young people. We've already got in place young commissioners, care leavers, ambassadors, and we've got a range of participation events. So what we are doing is making sure we understand the cohort of young people, what the presenting needs are, and how we make sure we have the right support arrangements for them to feel safe, for them to feel cared for them to feel that as they become adults, they can be part of a community and make a positive contribution. We'll also be exploring options around early permanence for children who are already looked after. So it's looking at long-term matching, either with their foster carers or identifying alternative care arrangements where they can have the long-term care commitments in place. We'll be looking at special guardianship arrangements and kinship or adoption. I mention all those because sufficiency is a range of options available. It's never a one-size-fits-all. We need to be really clear in terms of, if we've got younger children, the permanency pathway might look slightly different to that of a slightly older child. As part of this work, we'll be working closely with our commissioners as well as practitioners and our fostering community in terms of how we maintain placement stability and reduce disruption for our children and young people. We know that it's really important for young people to have that security. Without that, it impacts on their mental health, emotional well-being, and actually, the more disruptions young people experience, you have significant challenges in finding the right match and the right outcomes. So what we aim to do is make sure we provide the right wraparound support to our foster carers, residential homes, or any other provision. So rather than just thinking this is not working, we must move the child, we think collectively. Again, this is how we can really strengthen our sufficiency. One thing that's really important in all this is remembering that when children do come into care, the expectation should never be they remain in our care indefinitely. We as practitioners and officers work consistently to make sure we're engaging with families, and where it's safe and appropriate to do so, we can reunite children back to their families, and we create opportunities for other children who might need to be looked after in some of those vacancies that might be created. So sufficiency is really about an agile approach to commissioning, responding to the needs of children and young people who require care outside of their birth and immediate family. Having said that, we have to keep an eye on the looked after child numbers, because that's how we gauge what we need and what we need to be shifting to respond. And these numbers do fluctuate. At this point in time, our looked after child numbers are down to 263. These numbers are not static. They might change next week or in a couple of months' time. The challenge to us is how we ensure when children need that support, we've actually got the right options for their needs. We also know that for children coming into care, what we are seeing, not just in Thurrock, but nationally, is children are presenting with increase in complexity that is around behavioral, mental, emotional dysregulation when they're coming into care. That means we need to make sure we've got sufficiently skilled carers to support these children so they have the stability that they need regardless of where we place them. And in terms of monitoring the number of disrupted placements, we have regular arrangements in place as part of this sufficiency to understand why children and young people might need to move placement. So we take learning from that, and that learning is fed back into the whole sufficiency and commissioning arrangements, because we need to know what works. We need to know the areas that we need to strengthen. So a sufficiency strategy should never be static. So even though we've got this for a 5-year period, what we will be doing between us three is constantly reviewing and making sure it remains attuned to the needs of children that we are working with. In Thurrock, we actually have a positive story, which we do need to capture and highlight, in that the majority of our looked after children, a high proportion, are with foster carers. This is quite a change from where we were a couple of years ago when we had, and when I'm talking about foster carers, I just need to rewind. I'm talking about our in-house foster carers. These are foster carers we've recruited, we've trained, we are supervising, we are visiting on a regular basis, and these carers are taking on more of our children and caring for some of those children with multiple complex needs, because the support that we provide is, we're making sure we are responsive to some of those presenting needs. So at the moment, we've got 77 children who are placed with mainstream carers. We've got 28 children placed with connected carers, which is quite a high number when you total the two, and 72 children placed with independent fostering agencies. So what we are always trying to do is provide a home for a child who is unable to remain within their family network. Where it's not deemed appropriate, then we start looking at some of those alternatives, whether it's residential or semi-independent. But the first port of call is always family first, and then we look at in-house fostering arrangements. We also, as part of this sufficiency, make sure we have arrangements in place for our care-experienced young adults. That's those young people aged 18 to 25. Again, we need to make sure we've got suitable arrangements for their care, some of whom will have more complex needs. So we do have staying put arrangements, and that's incredibly positive, because what we have is foster carers who've cared for these children and actually will continue to care for them beyond their 18th birthday, because you're talking about some of our most vulnerable young people, and expecting them to have a higher level of independence at 18 is challenging. We do a lot of what we can to support. So where we've got staying put arrangements, we absolutely support that. But what it does mean is it impacts on the sufficiency for fostering, because we kind of have to balance that out. But for a lot of our carers, they are supporting children or young people post 25. For those with more complex needs, some of our foster carers have actually transitioned to shared lives. And that's a real acknowledgement that we've got children with significant additional needs. So we are really trying to be agile with this approach. It's, again, I reiterate, it's not a one-size-fits-all, and we are constantly evolving. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to hear the passion in your voice. Any questions from members or comments? Councillor Anderson?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for that presentation. I might be wrong. I don't think I am. I've been on children's ONS for a few years now. I think I started off in 2018, and I'm sure ever since then we've had higher than average rates of missing episodes, and this report mentions that. And it goes on to say that as a result, we're looking to enhance the impact of return home interviews. So I was just curious what exactly that means, what we're doing there.
Okay, so we've got a return home interview service. So when our young people go missing, one of the key things that we want to know is where are they at that time that they're missing. And for some of our young people, our return home interview service will go and engage with them. And then we have a meeting with the social worker to talk about that. So the social worker then understands the reason for the missing episodes, and they're skilled and they work with the young person to engage them. Some of our young people, our older young people, maybe 17 on the cusp of going to 18, don't want to tell us where they are, where they're corporate parent-like parents. And so they go missing, but they don't want to say that they're with a friend, because predominantly most children go missing will go and visit their family or go and visit their friends or will have a partner. So what we've tried to do, and we've increased this, and it is in our performance to 100% of return home interviews, is that we've really aimed high to engage our young people, and the approaches that we use to be understanding, like person-centred, to develop those relationships so that actually they can tell us. And what that has resulted in is that if the young person feels confidence to tell us, and then we can actually confirm where they are, so we'll ring a parent or a friend, and we can actually confirm where they are, and they're not missing, then we don't have to report them, so we're working with them. So I've probably talked a lot about that, but we've aimed really high at the engagement and the understanding, so young people feel safe enough to tell us without us feeling that we're encroaching on some of their free time.
And so what's the difference? What are we doing now differently compared to previous then? Because that sounded as though the sort of thing we've been doing for quite a while, and it's just the report mentions that we're enhancing the impact. So I just wondered if there's anything we're doing differently compared to previous.
Yeah, I think we've got a specific team that actually deal with that, and then they link into the social work team. So I think the oversight and the kind of strategy has improved over time, because you can have a mechanism in place where you offer a service, but actually it's about the impact of that service. So we've kind of stepped it up. So we've reviewed our young people, we've done an analysis over some of the concerns that's missing, some of the reasons they're not telling us, the ages, and then we've reviewed our strategy, if you like, and our intervention to target that.
Councillor Byrne?
Hi, thank you. 4.14 and 15, page 17, reduce the cost of care because we're going to have fewer children in care. I get that bit, but then are we going to be dealing with more families? Because then it says on that continuous page, we're going to ongoing financial support. So if we're dealing with more families because we're more successful, is that bill going to go up and up and up? So is it going to get more and more costly the more successful we are?
I think as we work with families, it's really important that where we have connected carers arrangements, we are financially remunerating those connected carers. So we pay them the equivalent of foster carers, but actually it's a lot cheaper than if those children were to be in our care, go missing, and then require more restrictive kind of care arrangements. So I think in the longer run, it's actually cost efficient rather than us not supporting those families appropriately.
Anyone else? Councillor Raper?
Thank you. Thank you for this. Just a quick question. On page 52, you talk about the diploma that UEA have worked on. Is it funded, the diploma in therapeutic parenting for foster carers?
Where is that, sorry?
That's
Sorry,
actually a
it's
different
on
agenda
page
item.
52.
Councillor Raper? That's agenda item 7.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I shall come back with that.
Are we still working closely with housing and for the older children that are going to looking for places to stay?
The short answer is yes. One of our pieces of work over the next 12 months is going to be to recommission our supported accommodation offer. Is to recommission our supported accommodation offer, and to do that with colleagues from housing, also with adult services as well, with the intention of creating a single smooth pathway where young people can be in care, can then transition through degrees of independence until they're ready to live without the extra support that they've previously been using. Obviously, for us to do that, that means that we need to have our housing colleagues to be on board with this as well, to support in providing the right kinds of accommodation that we use to provide those degrees, I suppose, those stepping stones towards independence.
Thank you very much. It's quite obvious the three of you could talk about this for a long, long time. If there are no other further questions, we'll go to the recommendations, and that's to review children looked after and care leavers placement sufficiency, needs analysis and strategy, and hold officers to account to deliver the services required as part of their statutory duties and their ambition for children. I do believe we've done that. Do you agree? Thank you. Okay, go on to item 8, which is the savings proposal. Sorry? 7, yeah, I've crossed out 7 because... yeah. Right, we're going to item 7, please, the fostering and adoption, recruitment and retention strategy. I think Elsie McQueen, are you presenting this item? No?
I'm going to introduce the item, Chair. So this recruitment and retention strategy is very much aligned to the sufficiency strategy. Now, in Thurrock, we want our children and young people to benefit from care arrangements that are local and to be placed with our in-house foster carers. This maintains their friendships, their schooling, their access to services such as a GP, and supports family time as appropriate. We know our foster carers and we know the support they need, and we know how to work with them to support and sustain placements. Now, Thurrock foster carers benefit from training, supervision, and wraparound supports that meets not only their needs, but the needs of the children placed in their care, as well as their own birth children. Because what we're really clear about is fostering households, every single person in that household contributes to fostering, including the birth children. So our arrangements and support is to make sure we support everybody so we can retain our carers. We also work hard to ensure we are strengthening foster carer resilience in managing and supporting the increased complex presentations of children and young people who are coming into care. So in terms of recruitment, we ensure engagement and marketing events happen at different locations within Thurrock. We use foster care fortnight to raise awareness. We maintain adverts, so there's visibility. It's really important to remember that those who consider fostering will not act on their first point of interest. It takes years sometimes. So making sure we maintain that visibility is really important. In some instances, it can take seven to 10 years before somebody actually makes up their mind to foster. So us being out there and being present is really important because it's a constant reminder to our community of what we need. And it's not always about foster carers necessarily having a spare bedroom. It's us thinking differently and outside the box, that if we've got somebody who's got capacity to support the fostering strategy, whether it's through day respite, for example, then we will be assessing and considering how we strengthen our offer. Where we are also trying to recruit in an area where there's increased competition from independent fostering agencies, as well as our neighboring local authorities. So what we are doing is making sure we remain astute to what's going on around us, the recruitment strategies that others are employing. But the most important and effective tool to recruit our carers is word of mouth. So if we treat our carers well enough, you know, word will go out there and carers will gradually come over to us. We actually have two independent fostering agency carers who've approached us wanting to be assessed to foster for Thurrock. Now, that's again through word of mouth and the reputation that we are developing with our fostering community. We also have quarterly newsletters that we send out to anybody who has expressed an interest in fostering. So it's, we don't let go of those who may not be ready to foster now. We just maintain that hook and that interest. And we hope as they see all the activities that we are doing, it might help them to be more motivated to foster. We are constantly advertising, and when we have foster carer applicants, what we actually do is ascertain where they've got the information about Thurrock from, because that helps us to evaluate the impact of our marketing and recruitment campaigns, so we know what works well. There are a range of support arrangements in place for our foster carers. Again, this is really important in terms of the retention. So effective supervision and support to foster carers is a strength within Thurrock. Sorry, we've got a workforce that's stable and really experienced, and a workforce that is able to listen to the feedback of the carers. So we have courageous conversations. I don't call them difficult conversations. They're courageous conversations because we need to know what's working or what's changing for us to be able to support. We've also got the Mockingbird approach, which is almost a replica of how a family would ordinarily work. So you'd have your main carer and then the hub carers. You know, so if you think of a family where you've got an aunt, an uncle, or a neighbor, you know, so the Mockingbird model actually replicates that. So children who require respite will be going to regular carers that they become acquainted with, and other children within that network that they're familiar with. So it doesn't feel alien that they're going and spending the night with a different carer, because that's part of the support network. We've also got a buddying system for those carers who are outside of the Mockingbird model. We've got support groups that are really active and flexible in terms of time, you know, so we can accommodate those carers who are working and those who are fostering full-time. We also review the fostering allowances. You know, although we say fostering is a vocation, but we have to understand that for those fostering families or communities, they need that financial support to manage their bills, to make sure that they can access activities as they wish for their children in their care. So fostering allowance are really important, and we also need to be competitive in terms of some of our competition out there. We offer ongoing training and support, including therapeutic support, because what we can't take for granted is we place children who've, in some instances, experienced significant trauma for their years, and their behaviors would be impacted by this. That therapeutic intervention and therapeutic support to our carers helps them to understand that trauma and to interpret some of those behaviors so it doesn't become a source of friction or a potential risk to that placement, but they're better able to really attune to the child. We also have support from the Foster Carer Association. They effectively are the bridge between our mainstream foster carers and the local authority. The expectation is that they keep us on our toes and challenge what we do, whether we need to do more of certain things. So it's really important that we have a proactive foster carers association. And we've got social events, really important that our foster carers also have an opportunity to let their hair down. If we don't do all of those things, then for foster carers, it can feel quite isolating and quite difficult for them to kind of maintain the level of motivation that's required to care for some of our most challenging children. And this is where our fostering recruitment and retention strategy, again, needs to be really agile, needs to be listening to our foster carers, and needs to be sufficiently flexible because our children coming into care are from different backgrounds. And again, we don't have a one-size-fits-all. We need foster carers from different backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, because that will match some of the needs of our children and also build the resilience back into the system. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report. Any questions or comments, members? Okay, Councillor Leakey, then Councillor Raper.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tender, for the report. It sounds so positive, and it's positive for me. However, I'm just so concerned about the approval rating for application for foster carers. It's falling down to 2%, and I'm wondering what is keeping people off from, or is it the assessment is so rigid, or what are the things that making it to fall from 5% to 2%? So it's quite a significant, decline in the approval for foster carers.
Thank you for that question. I would say where we are in terms of our fostering recruitment is not that different to other local authorities. We get a lot of inquiries, and within those inquiries, not everyone will be as suited to fostering. We also need to make sure that our assessment process is sufficiently robust, because we are approving unrelated adults to care for children, and some of these children will have really complex needs. So the assessment process is rigid, is robust, and does require a lot of exploration in terms of understanding potential carers' emotional resilience, emotional intelligence, their ability to work in an agile way with children who will present quite differently. And part of that assessment might result in some carers actually reflecting on their circumstances and thinking they're not ready at that point in time. And for some, because we have to do DBS checks and a range of checks, if there's any areas of concern, then we obviously have to act on that, because when we are placing our most vulnerable children, we need to trust that we've identified the most skilled and the right carers for our children. So we don't take risks in that particular area.
Listen, just the last one. When a foster carer moves from Thurrock to a different location, can they move with the cared for person, or what happens to the young person?
Right, if our foster carers move from Thurrock, let's say further into Essex, they remain our foster carers. And they'll take the young person with them if they are long-term matched. Because what we try to avoid is children feeling as if they don't actually belong anywhere. So that sense of, you know, families do evolve, situations change, and if carers are able to hold on to those children, then that's absolutely what we promote.
Councillor Raper? Oh, sorry, yeah, carry on, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide you with an example. We had a couple household who moved away. They had 3 children with, you know, significant needs, 2 of them in the Children Disability Service. And what we did is we linked them into the Mockingbird model. So what happens is once a month they come back with the children for a weekend so that they can have really good family time with their families and also be part of the Mockingbird. So it's a really good example about how we've held these carers and supported these carers to remain part of Thurrock but live where they want to, but also more importantly that the children get to still maintain their identity and family culture and see their families.
In terms of if the child is in the secondary school, so what happens? Does the person change school, or, you know, because there might be some children who are actually in school that can disrupt their education. So what will happen at that stage?
I would say that we have very good examples of transition planning. So like with any parent who might be moving away and their children's in school, it's about how do you manage that and what's the work that you do. So we do direct work with our children. They might go and visit the area. We look for the schools because obviously we want the right schools. So I would say that in terms of, for this particular family, the area that they went to, we scope out the schools and then we do the transition. I have to say, and I do know, from one of the 3 young people actually wrote and said to us that they absolutely love, they spoke to the independent worker, they love their new school, they love it, because we did the introductions and the transitions properly.
Councillor Raper?
Thank you. I think you can guess what I'm going to ask. The Diploma in Therapeutic Parenting for Foster Carers, is it funded or do they have to pay for it?
Yeah, I'll have to come back to you on that one actually, because I'm not entirely clear. I mean, I think that it could possibly be funded, but can I come back to you on that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more? Councillor Rigby?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I can see that you're doing everything you can with regards to recruitment, but nationally, I know the numbers are decreasing and the demand here is increasing. So what is the sort of backup plan if you ever face a situation where there aren't enough foster carers and neighbouring areas don't have any, and things like the supported accommodation strategy, they're quite long-term sort of plans. So what is the sort of backup in that sort of scenario if that happens?
So what we always try and do is, again, work with extended family members. And where we need to, we will train and provide additional support to family to care for children coming into care. But if we look at the work we are going to be doing around Family First Partnership Program, that's really more around where it's possible to keep children and maintain children within their family networks. But we are not going to be complacent. We're going to keep pushing in terms of that recruitment agenda. We're going to be working with our commissioning service to make sure we've got all those alternative options. And there's also something around building the relationship with our independent fostering agencies, because once you've got that relationship, you can start to negotiate some of the additional placements that you might need. But my aspiration is that we aim to recruit our foster carers, we retain our foster carers, and that we have sufficiency in terms of children coming into care. So we do know, for example, that sibling groups can be an area that's challenging for us. So we are now looking in terms of our recruitment to actually be focusing on potential carers who might be able to look after sibling groups.
Thank you. And does your data at the moment show that you have got sufficiency for the sort of near to long-term future at the moment? Are you showing that you are confident with what you're saying, that that's showing in data, is it?
Again, I think the short answer is yes. There's actually an awful lot of provision out there. I did a little survey a while back. There are 170 places in children's homes within 20 miles of this building. There's lots and lots of sufficiency out there. The issue is that it's not all as we'd like it to be for our children, and they're not always got the vacancies for our children because they're looking after children from some other areas. So as part of the work that we're doing, it is about, like Tendai was saying, building relationships with the organisations that have carers who live in our area, building relationships with the organisations who want to work with us to create the kind of children's homes that we think are most suited for our children. We're very fortunate here as well. We've got a brokerage team, a placement finding team, a home finding team, who are very experienced, who've been here for quite some time, who have built really, really strong relationships with organisations. Our next piece of work that we want to start doing is to talk to particularly the fostering agencies who have foster carers in our area and say, when vacancies arise with those carers, would you please talk to us about them before they get released to everyone else? And even prior to that vacancy, so that we can be planning for someone to be able to move in there. Obviously, like we've heard from Tendai and Elise, we'd much rather our young people, when they need foster care, were with our carers, and mostly they are. But when there is a need for an independent fostering arrangement, we'd like it to be close by. We'd like it to be with an organisation that we know and trust, and those are the relationships that we actually have with organisations now and are building on to make even stronger.
Thank you.
Councillor Alike?
I'll come first. Okay, so I was just going to ask a quick question about how can we attract foster carers? You know, what do we do in this scenario? Because it's like there's a lot of shortage of foster carers around the country. So not only Thurrock, but how can we kind of make it attractive for people to apply for fostering? Thank you.
I would say we are doing everything that we can. The trick with fostering is to make sure you maintain momentum and you maintain visibility. We can't slack. We just need to make sure we're going at it. We are also thinking outside the box in terms of how we engage with some of the new and emerging communities within Thurrock. So they know about fostering and know the benefits of fostering. So we are constantly making sure, you know, we are active out there. And I guess if I use this as an opportunity to say, as councillors, you could also support us, you know, by getting the word out there. So it's, you know, fostering should be everybody's business, really.
Councillor Anderson?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. Tonight was the first I'd heard of the Mockingbird model that we have, and it sounds like a really good thing. My question relates to a table on page 47. There's an age breakdown of children in care, and you've sliced out unaccompanied asylum-seeking children as well. I was wondering, what mechanisms, processes do we have in place when an unaccompanied asylum-seeking child presents themselves to us for verifying their age? Because I imagine that for those that were born here, there's birth records, we have records, even those that have migrated legally. I assume there will be some kind of written record, and I'm presuming that with unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, we don't have those. So what's the verification process?
Thank you very much for that question. With unaccompanied asylum seekers, there's two ways that they present to us. As we are a local authority with two ports, sometimes they'll come that way, but we are part of the national transfer scheme, which means the Home Office will allocate a certain proportion of unaccompanied minors to us. In some instances, we are able to determine the ages of those young people who are presenting to us. In others, where we think there's a question mark, we do an age assessment to try and work out from the narrative they provide and the timeline of their journey what age they might be. But it's not an exact science. So for the majority of unaccompanied asylum seekers, because most present at 16 plus, we tend to care for them within the semi-independent market, because that's where there's the right level of supervision. It also means they have a reasonable amount of flexibility depending on the independent skills that they present with. But this is an area that is always up for debate, but we do our best to make sure we are able to identify those that we think might be presenting as older and those who are definitely young and vulnerable. And we know for the unaccompanied minors who come, that journey, when you hear the story of the risks and the experiences along the way, there's significant trauma. So we need to be prepared as part of that to think around mental health, the language barriers, the cultural barriers. So there's a lot we take into account, which is why for us it's really important we have a diverse pool of foster carers, because they can help us as well in unpicking some of those cultural nuances that might help us understand potentially the age that young people might be at.
Councillor Diard.
Thanks, Chair. As a former foster parent, I've got nothing but admiration for your service right the way through from start to finish. And I see the reduction in foster carers, and I wonder in what areas could we be a little bit more positive going out into the community. I know you do go into the community, and I know you do advertise an awful lot, because I'm also in the community and I see your workers out there doing their best, and I see lots of adverts, but I personally don't see any of the actual positive efforts. You go physically into people's spaces and sort of, I think there's some at Lakeside, I believe. Yeah, I mean, that's really good. That's sort of getting into, but do you see the number of connections you get? Because I don't see many people sort of engaging with your staff, really. And I was wondering whether it might be a good idea to link up with a lot of the ethnic churches, because they're more like communities, aren't they? Do you do stuff like that?
The answer to that is yes, we do. We go to community events, and we try to be as visible as we can within the different communities. But sometimes it takes a little bit of time to build the relationship and the rapport and the trust. Some communities, depending on what they understand of children, social care, for example, might be a bit hesitant. So we do have a lot of work to do in terms of just making sure the fostering aspect is understood. But most importantly, I think what we want for ourselves is not just a increase in volume of carers coming in. We want carers who are going to take our children and look after our children. Otherwise, we can have 100 carers and 40 are sitting fallow. It doesn't help us. So what we're really trying to do is make sure we get the right carers with the right motivation. So even though you might be seeing a reduction in numbers, but actually those are carers that are hitting the ground running. They're not sitting fallow, they're taking our children, they're looking after our children. And we've actually got more children placed with our in-house carers than we've had for a couple of years. That's just showing the caliber of carers that we have, and we want to attract more of those types of carers.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Elise, and I do apologise. I mispronounced your name earlier, so.
That's fine. I was amused. Just to say, you know, in terms of a positive story, so Foster East, they set the targets for all of the foster services in the 11 regions, and they set ours at 8. Now, that might seem like a low number, but we talked earlier about having to really upskill the foster carers and have the right foster carers because of the complexities of children. And we're absolutely on track to meet our target of 8 this year, and that doesn't include our connected carers. So it seems small numbers, but actually eight's really good because that target was set for us, and we've met it.
Thanks for that. Just final couple of what sort of comment. I looked at the numbers and I think it said since 2022 we've lost 22 and gained 17, so an overall loss of 5. But you've had a good positive start this year with 2 households already being approved at panel and 8 currently in assessment. How long would an average approval take from application to panel agreement, and is there a particular area that slows things down?
In terms of the assessment, from contact assessment, it can take up to 6 months. But what Elise and I have been talking about is how we might try and condense some of that safely, obviously, because we want to make sure we've got all the relevant checks and balances in place before we approve foster carers. But also our fostering panel would not let any foster carer be approved without all those checks in place. But we are definitely looking at how we can speed up that process somewhat.
Yeah, thank you, because 6 months may well put some people off, mightn't it? That's definitely a problem.
I think 6 months does feel like a long time, but often we are having to work around potential carers availability, family events, but also as part of that assessment, what you're doing is working with them to understand what fostering is about. So there might be sessions where you need to go back, to make sure they've understood, because you don't want to have a foster carer who is then completely surprised and taken aback by the responsibility. So part of that work, you're assessing, but also training and really kind of developing the needs that we need in foster carers.
Thank you. I wasn't suggesting that it should be hurried up just for the sake of it, but say just 6 months does sound a long while, but thank you very much. If we go to the recommend, no one else, sorry. We go to the recommendations, which I think are on page 43. 1.2 is members to note and consider the options available. Do you agree we've done that? Agree? Members are to recognise fostering recruitment and retention as a key strategic priority to meet sufficiency, reduce reliance on independent agencies, and improve outcomes for our children in care. Agreed? Thank you very much. Now we can go on to item 8. It's definitely not going to be presented by Dawn Calvert because she's not here, so who's going to present this one? That's on page 69.
So I'll present the, I'm assuming, Chair, we're on and savings. I'm just hoping that's the agenda item. Yeah. Oh, that's good. So I'll present the two that are pertaining to education and commissioning. So the first one is around some education savings that we're putting forward for 26-27. That is £100,000, and it is about looking at education services across the whole system, so across the whole of education, to identify that saving. I think one of the things we're going to look at is some of the technologies. So you'll be very well aware, committee will be well aware, that we're looking at a range of different technologies that might help us with some of the work that we're currently doing. I have to say, colleagues, it will be challenging for us. However, we will look to ensure that we do meet that savings target. I'll be reviewing this sort of come early January, just to look at where that might be possible. And I think I've outlined here around what the proposed approach will look like. So I'm not sure there's anything else, colleagues. I'm sure you've had an opportunity to read it. You know, we will identify and find those savings.
Anybody have any questions on that briefing note? Yes. Councillor Anderson?
So you mentioned two items there. Were you presenting, obviously you've got the second one, that 100,000, and then you've got the Children's Commissioning Unit?
Apologies, Councillor, I'll do that one next.
Okay,
I thought
no
if I do them separately, it'll
yeah.
be easier. So that's the education one, and I'll come on to the next one in a moment.
I'll wait for the next one.
Okay.
Councillor Byrne, you on this one or the commissioning one?
Well, this will be the same question for all of them. Is all I'm worried about, what we're going to call it reductions, we call it savings, or we're going to call it cuts, but will our children suffer? Will they notice? That is all. If they're going to notice it, then I'm anti it, obviously, and if it's going to go along and it's not going to impact on the children, then that's fine. But I don't think any of us want to sit here and want to see reduction. I bet if we all had a vote, we'd want to give you a lot more money, wouldn't we? Because nobody wants to see cuts. What you're calling it, savings or whatever, but I see it as cuts. But will the children notice? Will it impact on the children? That's all I want to know.
I think if I take that question for all of the savings, you know, across the piece, I mean, obviously, we're in a position where we can't not make savings as a council. So Children's Services have been asked to make their contribution to savings. We've not put anything here forward that would impact on safeguarding or making sure that children are having their needs met, and any statutory requirements we will absolutely meet. So children will not suffer from that end. Obviously, some of these decisions will be tough decisions because, you know, certainly in our, what I call my education side, you know, because we're mainly an academised service, we don't have a really big, you know, in the council service. So even finding 100k is going to be challenging for us. But we've committed to doing that. If there are problems as we go through the year in making those savings, there is a mechanism for us to go back and say we are struggling because we're not going to disrupt services for children that they need. And some of this might be looking at very few, but we have got a few areas in our education side that are what we might call not statutory. So we're looking at that and we're looking at different ways of working. So I think you referenced the technologies. So there's anything in there that can help us deliver similar activities, but actually maybe not need as many staff to do that. So that's what we're sort of looking at. In the children's side, which was the other savings we'll come on to, so on the placement side, we've put forward 1.5 million worth of saving. Any child that needs a placement or requires support in that placement, they will absolutely get that. So this is not about saying, we're going to say, oh, sorry, we've spent our budget now and we've got a child that desperately needs a placement. we would never be in that position, and I can absolutely assure the whole committee, this council, you've got a children's services that wouldn't stand by and let that happen, and that's not what we're being asked to do. But it does mean that we have to make savings somewhere in our system. But what we're not doing is going for frontline staff, if you like. So frontline social workers, our frontline SEND workers, you know, where we have got statutory responsibility to deliver those services, that's not where we're looking at making any of our savings. So I don't know, I hope that's as reassuring as I possibly can be, and it is, as the statutory director, you know, I wouldn't be agreeing to savings that I thought might put children at risk and or families, because ultimately it's not good for children and families, but if you do things like that, it just moves things upstream and costs you more. So, well, I was going to say we're long in the tooth. I'm certainly long in the tooth enough to know, you know, that you don't get efficiencies by, you know, taking from those services, because eventually need escalates and that always costs more.
Yes, just a quick one. I just know, obviously you don't want to be announcing cuts. We don't want to hear you're in cuts, but we know you've got good cuts, so we're with you. Just to say, as we all agree, it's just about the kids, isn't it? So that's a good answer. Thank you very much.
Michelle, do you want to come back with the first one?
Would you like me to move on to the commissioning one? So currently,
Sorry. I didn't know if there was any more questions. Sorry, Councillor.
That's all right, thank you. Sorry, yes. So at the moment, the savings areas haven't really been identified apart from potential tax savings. So when are you sort of anticipating you'll get those? And I know that Sheila mentioned that if you're struggling, you'll have to report back. Do you have a sort of time frame that you've got to find those and identify them, really?
well, they're for the next financial year, so I've got sort of from January to sort of end of March to look at where we might be able to make those sort of savings. So, you know, it will be within, you know, that saving period of 26 to 27. So, but of course, education, as we all know, runs on a different time frame, doesn't it? So we're running sort of September right the way around. So it's all of that. So we'll be looking at that. But, you know, as Sheila has said, we're committed to making those savings. We know that's what we need to do, and we'll be looking at how we can do that, whilst always, as Councillor Byrne has pointed out, making sure that, you know, our children and young people are at the forefront. You know, that's the important thing here about our children and young people.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me move to the next one. So the next one is looking at our current commission services. We currently commission a range of services. The budget for that is £620,000, and we're looking to make a £200,000 saving on that budget. It is a range of services. What I've laid out here is that what we're going to look at is, you know, in that January to sort of March time, what those services currently are. I mean, we've got all that detail, of course, but for me, the important thing here is actually, are there any other potential funding streams that could fund some of that work? So, you know, that's one of the things we're always looking at. Is there anyone else that could potentially fund some of this work? Does it link into some of the other sort of strategic priorities of other parts of our system? And how can we sort of look to move that forward? But again, we have committed to making those savings, and we will be looking, you know, at those services. And actually, interestingly, picking up on what Janet was saying earlier, thinking about how they align to, you know, that family first model. You know, what does that look like? How are we dovetailing all of that work in? Because I think what's very clear around the new Family First is it's the whole of children's services. It's not just about social care, it's about the whole of children's services. So we will be looking closely at all of those things that we commission across children's services and linking it into, you know, some of the models that sort of Janet was talking about earlier. So there's a time frame in relation to that, and we will be looking to see, you know, how we make that saving.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for speaking on that, Michelle. First question I had, for the benefit of, you know, who knows, who knows that, who's at home at the moment watching us, for the benefit of anyone that might be watching us, what sort of services are we talking about? Can you give us some examples of the sort of services that
Yeah,
the
I mean,
unit commissions?
there's a range of services. So we commission some services to support some of our teenage parents. We commission some support around some of advocacy. We commission a whole range of services, Councillor Anderson. As I said, I'm not going to go into them line by line, but there's a range of services that we commission. And I think I want to be really clear here. This is one of the things I'm really passionate about doing with this, is looking to see actually, are there other funding streams that can look to support us with this? What would that look like? How do we drive that forward? So we will be doing that review in that sort of January to March time, and we'll then be clearer around where we need to make that saving. And again, linked into some of the work that Janny was talking about earlier. And for me, we are always looking at what are we commissioning? Is it still doing what we need it to do? Does it still meet the needs? Have some things changed, and we need to change with that? So there'll be a range of things that we are looking at. I think the other thing to remember here is that whilst that's the proportion that we've got, there is also money coming in from other places from some of these services. So again, to give you reassurance, we will be looking at what we need to do around this going forward. I hope that answers.
Yeah, so we'll have a bit more detail in terms of the particular services
Absolutely.
between January and March.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. My follow-up question was going to be, we're looking to make savings of 200,000 here, with a pre-saving budget of 620,000. That's nearly a third. That's quite a lot. So I was going to ask, are you confident that we're going to be able to do this without significantly impacting service provision that's currently provided to residents? I mean, I can see you moving to answer that. I'm happy for you to answer. I was just going to say, I appreciate Sheila kind of, answered that when she spoke. If you want to comment though, please.
Actually, Councillor, I was going to say Sheila had sort of answered that question, if that's okay. I mean, I think committee will know that, children's services is a service that will always put children, young people and families at the heart of everything we're doing. But we also have to recognise we're in a position where we do need to make some of these savings. And I think, as Sheila's already sort of talked about at length, we will ensure that to the very best of our abilities, we will always protect what's happening for our children, young people and families.
Well, one final question. I was quite curious. Under mitigation measures, we've got potential income generation initiatives. So do we have, again, like you say, we're at an early stage here, but I was wondering if you could give a flavour of what we're possibly looking at there.
Well, we are at early stages, but one of the things that I've always considered is how do we tap into some of the other wider funding opportunities which are there. And when we think about income generation, one of the things that always strikes me that people do quite successfully, don't they, is they generate income around their sponsorship. There's a whole range of things, Councillor, where people do generate income. And for me, it's about thinking differently. I think we have to, as an organisation now, start to think differently around how we fund some of our services. And I think what I think is very positive is within the work around commissioning, procurement and all of that work that's going on sort of like at the centre of the organisation, it is also now about commercialisation. What can we do commercially? What does that look like? How do we attract that sort of external funding opportunity? And with that, what are those income generation opportunities that we could tap into? So this is an area that I'm particularly interested in. So I'll be looking to see what we might be able to do in that particular space.
Councillor Ken, did you have a question?
Yeah, just to follow up a bit from what Councillor Anderson was saying, because obviously if you look at on paper, it's nearly a third of the budget, which for a lot of people could sort of start alarm bells ringing. And you mentioned that you're going to do some work on how you're going to find the savings. will you be able to report back to us, either if it's just a briefing note, so that we've got more idea of what we're looking at and how, and also sort of like the measures to ensure that we don't end up making the saving but inadvertently losing, some of the, make the service isn't as good as what it would be because of the saving we've made. So have a knock-on effects, basically, is what I'm saying. It's
So if that's okay, Chair, can I bring something back? It'll be a briefing note, Councillor, yeah? Briefing note, yeah. And actually, I'll probably combine it with the education one as well, so that you've got more detail around that, just to give some committee reassurance about what we're doing with that, as a briefing note, if that's okay. Yeah? Is that okay, Chair? Yeah?
It's fine with me. Yeah. These are briefing notes anyway, aren't they? Sheila, do you want to go over the last bits in the children's social care and early help savings, please?
Yeah, I was also going to say, because we haven't got the finer detail in all of these, you may want us to bring back everything to actually be a little bit clearer, because by February we will be clearer about exactly where we're getting these savings from. But on the children's social care side, so the transformation is the stuff Janet was talking about earlier. So we've got 800k against that. We know where sort of 200k of that's coming from, definitely, because we've redesigned one of our out-of-hours services, and we've already embedded a different way of working that has released 200k's worth of savings. So we're already clear about some of that savings. The rest of it will be from, again, what Janet was talking about earlier, about how we're going to work differently and how we're going to have some different roles. So we're looking across the whole of children's services here at this, and it may end up being, 4 or 5 posts. And we have had sort of movement in the service, and because we know this is coming, we're looking at sort of holding on some of posts while we think about how we redesign and move things around. So certainly if in February we can come back with being really clear about exactly where those posts are, what they've been doing. Most of them now are vacant because people have just recently moved. This isn't vacant posts we've had for years. These are people who have moved around, and we do get quite a lot of movement in children's services. So it does give us opportunity to hold stuff and go, right, we're going to do something a bit different. But then we can bring that to you. But we're confident of making that 800k, and again, without impacting on the services we deliver to directly to children and families. The 1.5 million against placements, and that looks like a very, very big figure, and it is on some levels, but actually that could equate to 6 or 7 children's placements being in a different place, because our children's placements are, some of them, in residential, and some in our higher cost foster placements who get lots of additional support. It can cost 300, 400k a year. So, and also this is on the back of some of the value in care work we had done by Empower, probably about sort of almost a year ago actually, but we're embedding that, and that's about contracting differently, that's about procuring differently. So that's not about reducing the service we provide to children, but trying to work with the people who, some of those placements are incredibly expensive, and part of the Children's Wellbeing Schools Bill is about trying to cap some of the profits that are being made by companies who are charging us quite a lot of money to look after some of these children. But aligned to this is that we are reducing the number of our looked after children. So I think that was in one of your reports about how we have reduced incrementally year on year, and it's gone down further from what we'd put in the report, because I think it's about 266, is it, at the moment? 263, it's gone even further than I looked at it last time. So, I mean, that's a significant reduction, I mean, for quite a while in Thurrock, our looked after children numbers were around about 290, 300. So we are reducing our numbers of looked after children, which also reduces our costs. So some of this is about sort of getting the benefits of all this other work that's going on, but also procuring differently and being much more mindful about how we commission. I know James is here and he's been involved in a lot of that work. So again, we are as confident as we can be about that 1.5 million, but my caveat to that is, if a child needs a placement and it is very expensive placement and that's the only placement and the right placement for that child, we will still make that placement. So what we're not saying here is it's 1.5 million and that means if a child has a need, we're not going to meet that need. That's not what will happen here. And it'll be monitored regularly, you know, as we do anyway. We monitor constantly our placement situation. So as far as we can be, we are relatively confident about making that 1.5 million saving, with the caveat being, if more children need to be in our care because something's happened or whatever, we will be looking after those children and they will get the placements that they need to be in, you know. So we won't be saying we can't put you in a placement because we won't make our savings target. And I can see Vicky's nodding as well, you know, absolute council support for that we would not put our children at risk on the basis of we might not make our savings. And the housing options one, I think James has already mentioned, is in a previous report. This is more aimed at our 16 and 18 plus placements. So children who are no longer looked, as soon as you're 18, legally, you cannot be a looked after child, but you become a care leaver. And we still have absolute responsibilities up to 25, and actually we go beyond. If young people are still very, I suppose those of us who've got children know, you don't just at the age of 21 or 25 say, you know, off you pop. So as good corporate parents, you know, if we've got young people who still need our support post 25, we do stay involved with them and make sure that they're getting their needs met. But we have a group of young people, 18 plus, who are ready for different accommodation. But at the moment, we haven't got, because there is a national shortage, you know, of housing and housing options. So those young people have ended up staying in 18 plus, but when I say 18 plus, the young people might be 20 or 21 or 22. It isn't the minute you're 18 we say you've got to move on. It's when they're ready. But when those young people are ready, we don't at the moment always have the housing options to move them on to. And it means they're staying in placements that are actually very expensive because there's lots of support package in place, which the young people don't actually need anymore. So this is about trying to find different ways, and James and Elise and others have worked very closely with our housing colleagues to come up with other options. So we've put forward 300k as a saving, and we're very confident that we're going to make that 300k saving. And again, just to give you assurance, this isn't about saying to young people, as soon as you're 18, you must move on. This is about young people post 18 who have been assessed as being ready to move on. So they might be 23, they might be 20. Some young people at 18 think they're ready to move on, but it's not usually 18, it's usually more 20, 21, 22. And we just need different options so that they can move on at that point. And that's what we're working on at the minute.
Thanks, Sheila. Any questions on that one at all? Yeah, Councillor Byrne?
Yeah, when this massive savings, you've got a big task on. Is it going to get kind of like early warning signs? Are you going to, like, if something is, you can't do it, you're going to put your hand up and say, we can't do this? Is that, you're not going to be like, leave it to last minute and count it as a failure? I mean, you're not going to, if you don't reach this target, it's not a failure, it's just you can't do it. But really need someone to go to, wherever you've got to go, we can't do that. And are you going to be, if you're like brave enough or whatever, to just say, we can't do it?
Absolutely, and certainly within the council, we have monthly monitoring of the savings across every directorate, you know, so it's not just us, but, you know, and we would be very quick to say if we didn't think we were going to be able to deliver something, you know, because the expectation on us is that we find mitigations maybe elsewhere, you know, so if we're not able to meet a saving through here, then we might be looking at something else in our system that we hadn't thought about at this time, but actually can be a mitigation for a saving. But you know, I've been the DCS here for 5 years, and I'm really confident that if I was to say I cannot meet something, and I think that would lead to difficulties for our children and young people, you know, so far I've always had a really positive response to that, which is, well, we'll have to look at something else then. But equally, every year, the savings we put up in children's services, we have delivered. And we don't tend to put savings up unless we think we've got a fairly good chance of achieving them. But the caveat always is, we don't know, there may be demand come from somewhere that we just don't know about today. And if that were to happen, then I'd be raising that and saying, so when we agreed this, we had this number, but now it's gone up another 20 or 30, we just simply can't do that. But at the moment, all this brilliant work that everybody's been talking about, the early help work, the prevention work, is actually doing what we thought it would do, which is driving down the statutory involvement. So all the while that the whole thing's working and working well, you know, that's why we feel confident that we can deliver this.
Councillor Rigby? We must move on after this because
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sheila. Looking at the HMOs aspect, they can be quite costly. So are you sort of confident you'll be able to negotiate quite good rents on that? And how will you allocate the care leavers into them as well?
I mean, we've actually been able to negotiate rates that are considerably lower than we were having to pay for supported accommodation. We've got good relationships with a small number of local providers who know the kind of homes that we're looking for, and they know the kind of young people that we want to be living in those homes. And yeah, we get some good deals from them, and we usually negotiate the good deals they offer us a little bit lower just for good measure as well.
Councillor Leakey?
Sorry, Barry.
You want to come back on that? Sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to support what James has said. And actually, on top of that, we make sure for those young people who are able to claim housing benefit, start to claim that so we can reduce some of that cost to us.
Councillor Leakey?
Thank you, Chair. Just want to correct me if I'm wrong. Last year, when we had a proposal that the Thurrock will have accommodation for young people post-18, that's Thurrock-owned accommodation for. Is that still in place, or has it changed?
Yeah, so the homes that we've with local providers, we've had a mixed sort of success rate on that. Some children have gone into those placements and have done really well and have now moved on. And I think we're looking at one of those placements becoming HMO for us. So we're sort of always looking at where's the need, and if we have those placements, do we need to move them into doing something different? So we still have got those physical placements that belong to us, and James and his commissioning team are working on making sure we get, you know, the right placements for children, but also at the right cost for us as a local authority.
Thank you very much for that report. I think we need to move on there, but I need one quick question. It's about EHCPs. There's always been a shortage of educational psychologists. I know that, and it's always been something slowing the EHCP process up. But I read or was told in the corporate papers that we now have recruited one who will start in December. Is that a full-time employee, and will that help with the EHCPs?
It absolutely is, and it will help with the timeliness of EHCPs. What I can report to committee is that for the month of November, those that came in timescale was 58%. And if I can just say to committee, in previous months, we were around 30, 25. So it has already made a significant impact. And I think we've also got another new EP sort of joining us soon. So we've had a successful recruitment campaign around EPs, and I am confident that we will see that indicator sort of keep going in the right direction. So it's a very good news story for us, actually.
Excellent, that's great to hear, it really is. If there are no further questions, I think we're just slightly behind schedule now. Can we go on to the work programme on page 77? Claire, going to present that, please?
Thank you, Chair. So our next meeting is the 12th of February. There are several various items for consideration, and some of these may be better to be brought to the committee via briefing notes, but we're working with officers to identify those as required. And if I can also take the action log and recommendations tracker at the same time, if that's all right, Chair. So you'll see that there's some open actions on the action log as these remain ongoing as they relate to some white papers that are required for the SEND reform and some further actions for the committee to consider any questions ahead of its meeting with the Regional Schools Director. And the recommendations tracker is just to keep you all abreast of the various journey of the different scrutiny reports, and any briefing notes are included within that for information purposes as well. Thank you, Chair.
Any comments? Councillor Lydiard?
Something quite separate, really, Chair. As you know, we've got a £10 million youth zone being built in Tilbury, and I was wondering what's the best way of getting our looked after children to use the space, possibly subsidise their use. I don't know, come up with some ideas maybe as part of the new work programme, please.
Certainly something we'll look into, but February's programme's a little bit busy at the moment, isn't it? Well, certainly, yeah, it's a great idea. No, definitely. We'll have a look at it. I will reiterate that the meeting with the Regional Schools Director is on the 29th of January, so if you do have any questions that you'd want answered to him, I think about them or even send them in to Claire. I think it's important that we use that time with him. I'm sure it'll be during the day, and I think it's on Teams as well. Yeah, it's on Teams, yeah. If that's all, I'd like to close the meeting at 20:56. Thank you very much.